Yo, what is up, my beautiful people? Now, let me just start off by saying I didn't even want to make this video. I was specifically trying to avoid this video because it just didn't seem fair and I didn't want to seem like an Intel hater, and you're going to see what I mean by that as the video goes on. Now, I just want to start off by saying this was my first handheld ever. This is what started me on the Barely Average Dude journey into handheld insanity. This was actually my first handheld I ever got. This is the Intel OneXplayer 1S, and I specifically got the Intel version. I didn't get it by accident. I specifically chose the Intel version over the AMD version because the Intel version had Thunderbolt 3, which means that it can connect to eGPUs. So this is not something that the AMD handhelds had at that time. They were on like the 4000 series and the 5000 series, but the Intel handhelds had Thunderbolt 3. And to me, that means that it was a little bit more, I guess, future-proof, had more longevity, because in 10 years, I can still connect it to an eGPU and get some use out of it. But the AMD handhelds are pretty much limited to whatever they were capable of at the time. So that's why I got the Intel version for eGPU support. But today, it's just really hard for me to even recommend an Intel handheld because it's just so far behind, and I don't want to sound like a hater. The question is it really that bad? I don't know. We're going to see over the course of this video. But I'm going to just start off by saying I don't want to sound like an Intel hater, and that's probably what it's going to sound like over the course of this video. And let me just show you. This is like just a little taste of what's to come. Now, I'm playing Dead Cells on both of these devices. On the AMD X1 Mini, I am at 10 watt TDP. On the Intel X1, I am at 15 watts. Keep that in mind. 15 watts, 10 watts. This is pulling 50% more power. And let's check out the FPS here. On the Intel X1, I'm getting anywhere from 100 to 150 max. I'm seeing. On the AMD handheld, at 10 watts, I'm at 280, 290 FPS. This is not a drill, you guys. Look at that. Look at the FPS right now. 280, 290 at 10 watts. The Intel handheld here at 15 watts can't even hit 200. Now I know you're saying, well, 170 is still a great number. But the thing is, I'm pulling 50% more power and I'm still getting more than 50% less FPS. And this is like the story of the day here. I have to use so much more power to try to match the AMD, and sometimes still behind. And that's really like the theme of the day. But we're not going to stop here. Let's test some more games, and I promise you guys I'm not a hater, but just stick with me and let's see what actually happens. Okay, so now we're in another game. Still what you might call a light indie game. We are at in Hades 2 this time, for real. And we are at 1600p high settings, so this is pretty much maxed out. We are at 25 watts on the Intel X1, and we are only at 20 watts on the AMD X1 Mini. And at 1600p high settings in Hades 2, there's no enemies, mind you. We are getting around 116 FPS here. As you can see, I'll just let you guys see that. We're getting 116, 117 FPS on the Intel X1, and on the AMD X1 Mini, we are getting over 150 FPS. So we're getting anywhere from 145 to 155, as you can see there. And keep in mind, this is at 20 watts, and this is at 25 watts. So we're getting less than 120. I have VSync off, by the way. So we're getting less than 120, which means this wouldn't even keep a stable 120. If you had VSync on, it wouldn't even give you a stable 120 at 25 watts. And this at 20 watts is well over 150. So this would give you 144 stable FPS. And as you can see, I'll just do some attacks here. So it would activate the graphical engine here. And we're still getting around 115 on the Intel X1, and we're still holding around 150 on the X1 Mini. So let me go face some enemies to see how that affects the FPS here. So with enemies on screen, we are, I just want to hit 50 FPS. I'll count that as like a glitch because this game technically is still in early access. We are hovering around 107 FPS, 108 FPS as you can see here, 110. I saw it go down to 105. So we can't even get an average of 120 at 25 watts in Hades 2. Now let's take a look at the AMD X1 Mini at 20 watts, right? So at 20 watts here, with enemies on screen, we're still hovering around 140. I saw it dip to 120 just now, but we're back up to 150, 145. So we could still get a smooth 144 on this screen here. So yeah, we're hovering around 140 at 20 watts. And this is like just the beginning of the end here, you guys. At 25 watts, we can't even get 120 in Hades 2. And at 20 watts, which is 5 watts less, which is like 20% less TDP, we are still getting more FPS, right? So we're getting around 35% more, so 20% less power, and we're getting 35% more FPS. That's just insane to me. And I know that, you know, you may say, oh, you're still getting 100, but that's the thing. Anytime you talk about the Intel handheld in relation to the AMD, you have to say, oh, it's not that bad, it's not that bad. But the thing is, if you have to say it's not that bad, then it really is that bad. It's that bad, you guys. And I know that, you know, still getting 100, it may be good enough for some people, but good enough is not good enough when there's no, like, this is not I didn't get a discount. I'm not saving battery. I'm using more power. I'm not saving money. I'm not saving energy. So at that point, it's just a waste. But anyway, we're not finished. Let's get into some more games and see if, you know, if Intel can pull a comeback. Okay, so the next test is going to be the Returnal benchmark. Now we're pushing into like AAA game territory here, so we can get a sense of how these handhelds do with those heavy hitters. Now, I'm so confident in the AMD handheld, and if you're still watching, you know, this is just for fun at this point. I'm so confident in the AMD handheld that I will be at 25 watts on the AMD handheld. I will take the TDP all the way up to 35 watts. So this is going to give it the most power that it has available. And it really going to push itself to the limit to see the max potential of what it can do. And I'm going to run the Returnal benchmark. We are at 35 watts versus 25 watts, so it should be interesting to see how the gap is actually closed. So let's run the benchmark, 1200p, low settings, FSR upscaling to performance. Let's run the benchmark and see what it's about. Okay, I'm gonna interrupt at this section because if you look here, we have like these weird blobs, and like if you see here, it's like actually supposed to be a see-through shield. This is like a graphical glitch that has been persistent across every a GPU driver update. It's supposed to be like a translucent like energy shield, and on the Intel it's just like a blob of light. You can't even like really see through it. And this is just like an example of like the graphical glitches that have been persistent across, I think we've seen around 8 to 10 driver updates at this point. And this is not like a new game. This game is probably like, what, 2 years old? Returnal is not getting any updates, so it's not like they're trying to keep up with the, you know, the developer. It's just, they haven't fixed it. I don't know if you have to wait for every game to be patched individually, but there are often graphical glitches that are not fixed after, you know, 5, 8, 10 GPU driver updates. It's insane. Like the drivers are so far behind, and there's glitches in games that are still not fixed after all of these updates. The first day I took this out of the box, I installed this game, ran the benchmark, and it had that word graphical glitch. Now we're, I don't know how many months later, like 6 months later, and I'm still seeing that same graphical glitch after all the GPU updates. Anyway, let's look at the results, and it's just insane here. We got an average of 30 FPS, which is something. And on the AMD 8840U, we got 49 FPS. Now this is tied for the most I've ever seen on the handheld, 49 FPS. Keep in mind, this is 25 watts versus 30 watts. And 35 watts actually. So I guess at 35 watts, you get 1 frame per watt, but not even. I would say the highest I've seen on the Intel X1 is 35. So this is like a bad day for it to get 30. But let's just say this is 30 to 35. And the AMD handheld is getting 45 to 49 at 25 watts. This is at 30, keep in mind, this is at 35 watts and this is at 25 watts. So this is pulling much more power, 10 more watts, and is getting 19 FPS less. How many is that? That's like almost 50% less FPS, you guys. That's insane to me. I don't know, you guys. It's not looking good for the Intel handheld, and I don't want to seem like a hater, but the numbers speak for themselves. I'm getting 31 here. I'm getting almost 51 here. The gap is too wide for me to say that this is good enough. Just thinking about what's available. Now we're gonna run a few more tests, but it's already not looking good. So, let's keep this going and let's just keep torturing the Intel X1 to maybe see if we can get some performance out of it. Okay, so the next test is Cyberpunk 2077, and we are matching the TDP now. So we're gonna go to 30 watts on the AMD X1 Mini, and we're at 30 watts on the Intel X1. Match 30 watts on both of these to see what it can do. We're in Cyberpunk 2077, low medium mix, upscaling set to performance. Let's run the benchmark and see how they do. Okay, so the Cyberpunk 2077 benchmark is finished, and at 30 watts, the Intel X1 got an average of 40 FPS, and the AMD X1 Mini got an average of 49 FPS. So at 30 watts in Cyberpunk, the AMD X1 Mini is getting over 20% better performance, because 10% would be around 4.5. So 9 frames is around 21% better performance at 30 watts, which is it's just crazy to me. Just to think that we can get 20% more FPS. One more game to run here, and then I'll get you guys out of here. It's not looking good. This is Intel's final chance right now to pull a comeback. So let's get to the next game and see if Intel can finally put up some respectable numbers. Okay, so the last benchmark for this video is going to be Forza Horizon 5. Last and final hope for Intel, so we took it up to 35 watts just to give it one last chance, give it all it has to see what type of numbers it can put up on the board. Now we are still at 30 watts on the AMD X1 Mini. We're gonna bring that down to 25 just to give it a little padding, just to see if we can get some similar numbers here. So at 25 watt TDP on the X1 Mini, 35 watt TDP on the X1 Intel. We are at medium settings, 1200p upscaling set to balance. So let's run the benchmark and see what type of numbers we can get. Okay, so the benchmark has finished. We got an average of 55 on the Intel X1 and 72 on the AMD X1 Mini. Now I don't have to do the math. It's almost 20 FPS less on the Intel X1, and we were at 35 watts versus 25 watts. I really don't have to do the math for you guys. You can just see how the AMD handheld is just far ahead of the Intel at this point. Now, like I said at the beginning, I don't want to be like a hater, but this is kind of inexcusable. In what world should I recommend this when you can get this, for the same price? It's not like you're paying, less money to get the Intel version. It's really no reason to even consider the Intel version. They both have like Oculink for eGPU support. This has Thunderbolt, but this has USB 4, which also has eGPU support at 40 gigabits per second. I don't know in what world I could reasonably recommend the Intel version over the AMD version. And everyone always says, over time, the drivers will get better. It will get better. It's not showing that it will get better. I don't know if people are like working directly with Intel, so they know what's going on behind the scenes. But until they show me that they can be better, I'm not gonna just say it will get better, because it has to get better. It doesn't have to get better if they don't make it get better. I don't know why people think that it just has to get better. I always see that comment saying it has to get better because Intel would just will it to get better. It needs to show that it's gonna get better first before we start saying that it's going to get better. Now, I'm on the latest drivers, so I don't want anyone to say just update the drivers. I'm on the latest drivers, latest BIOS. The Intel version is just lagging behind the AMD version. In every test that I do, even if it gets closer, it never surpasses the Intel version. And in some benchmarks, the average may be high, but then you get into the actual gameplay, it's actually like jittery and stuttery. There's compilation of shaders, as you saw in the Returnal benchmark. There's graphical glitches where some shaders don't load properly. There's a whole skew of issues, and it's just no reason for me to recommend Intel over AMD. Like I said at the beginning of this video, I'm gonna close out by saying I'm not an Intel hater. My first handheld ever was an Intel OneXplayer X1, and I do think that they should be better, but it's a shame that they're not better at this point, and there's no reason for me to recommend it. I don't know what else you guys want to see. Leave a comment down below if you're rocking with the Intel version still. Is it good enough? Maybe it is for you, but just comparing the two, I'm gonna say right now straight up, it's not good enough. It's a shame, and it's just sad to see Intel lagging behind this far. It's like they're 2 generations behind right now. I do want to see them get better over time, but it doesn't have a good track record or trajectory to make me optimistic of what's to come. I do want to see it get better, but right now it's just not showing signs of getting better. Anyway, moral of the story is get the AMD version. Avoid the Intel version at all costs right now. I'm gonna keep coming to you guys. Maybe in 6 months it will be amazing. I'll let you guys know, but right now avoid the Intel version at all costs. If you have the Intel version, sell it or just be fine with what you have. Anyway, I'll catch you guys in the next one. Like, subscribe, ring that bell, all that great YouTube stuff. Is it good enough? No, but I guess sometimes in life that's all you get. Anyway, peace.